It's Michael Shawn. You want to let me in?
Sure. Holy Frioles, what a show they got lined up for you, pal.
All right then, pal. You want to let me in?
Sure. I was just looking at your schedule. Whoa. You're going to be way out in the desert, some big mountaintop.
Okay.
Then you got your interview with one of those expert-type guys with Bigfoot.
The Unexplained Files.
Yeah. After that, you're going to go up on the Colorado Rockies and crash down a mountainside.
Is that all?
Oh, yeah. I got one piece of advice for you.
Can't wait to hear this.
You should call Tom Selleck to be your stunt double.
Would you open the door? 7.
Start the clock.
6.
Stand by, Eddie Bay 1.
5.
Stand by, Sweetie Pie.
4.
Bring Studio Mike's hot.
3.
Stand by, Michael Shawn.
2.
Roll music.
1.
Well, howdy, y'all. The Free Range Texan podcast is underway. This here program is a special look at the way life is shaping up for folks in the U.S. of A., seen through the eyes of a born and bred West Texan. Our host is a veteran broadcaster who is known for his campfire visits on radio. Michael Shawn is standing by.
Stand by, Michael Shawn.
So here he is, our host, a real free-range Texan himself, Michael Shawn.
It is episode number 5. The Free Range Texan. It is good to be rolling with everybody. We are a bi-weekly podcast. It was pointed out to me that I hadn't been mentioning that. The Legend of Santiago Peak going to be on our program. Also, we have a cryptozoology investigator, Daniel Jones. Little bit of a follow-up from last episode's interview. A story about C.B. Stubblefield. Some of you know him as Stubbs. And of course, we'll be going to the Campfire. Want to remind you, pictures of our guests and other behind-the-scenes stuff now appearing on the blog and on our Facebook, Free Range Texan Facebook page. And have I got a treat for all y'all? A musical treat. Oh, get ready. That crystal clear Rio Grande mariachi band, they're getting ready to hoop it up for us here. It's going to be a great show. Free Range Texan, let's get ready to ride. Well, the communication lines are blowing up. Man, we appreciate you listening out there, not just in Texas, not just in the United States, but overseas as well. We are glad to have you on board. A little bit of free-range Texan in all of us, we figure. Now, I got an email the other day. It's freerangetexan.net website. Now, that's where you go when you want to communicate with us. And Mary Ann in Tucson, Arizona said she was ready to hear a lot more of that crystal clear Rio Grande Mariachi Band, our official studio band, and so we thought rather than just put a recording on the blog, we would actually feature them here for 2 or 3 minutes on our show. So here they are, direct from Ground Zero Studios at 18PR, the crystal clear Rio Grande Mariachi Band. That's what you get on the big budget shows, folks. There's an area of far west Texas. Some call it the Big Bend. Some call it Badlands. Some call it God's country. But being uniquely qualified to have an opinion on the subject, I'll tell you that old Michael Shawn believes that the area surrounding Brewster County, Texas, is deeply rich and abundantly colorful in the tales of its past and present. Inside the region, rising up from endless miles of desert, is a 6,524-foot peak known as Santiago. It was named for a headstrong rancher. Early in the 1800s, Apache Indian raiding parties would systematically ride north into the Pecos country of Texas, steal some cattle, but mostly horses, and hightail it back south to the Badlands. On one of these events, the area ranchers got a posse together and began trailing the Apaches south. It was rough and demanding country, and one by one the posse dwindled to only a few. And at last, only the rancher named Santiago was willing to continue to pursue the Apaches. The Apaches and their horses left a trail that could be followed, even through the cactus and the rock-strewn landscape. And so to make this long story as short as I can, I'll simply tell you that our Apache bandits had retreated unto the side of the only mountain that gave them a clear view of anyone pursuing them a day in advance. Santiago rode boldly into their camp. Arrows flew, gunshots rang out, and by the time the smoke cleared, 8 or 9 Apaches had been mortally wounded and lay around him in the rocks. However, ultimately, instead of recapturing his horses, the Apaches captured him. The chief told him that he was about to die. And for the first time, Santiago fell to his knees and began to weep. The old Apache chief looked at him and asked a question. "Why do you cry? Today you have killed many of my people. This is truly your victory." I'm pretty sure, amigos, that Santiago wasn't looking at that quite the same way. But the Indians named the mountain that from that day forward would be known as Santiago. Now there's a fast forward to this story. Progress City was said to be on top of Santiago Peak. It was invented by swindlers to dupe residents of other parts of Texas into buying town lots. Seriously. In 1910, there were as many as 1,000 lots that were being sold. Now, this is a great story, and it took some time for folks to realize that there was not even a trail to the top of Santiago Peak. But we'll save it for another show. Santiago Peak. Just another fascinating story from the Badlands of Texas. We will definitely return and talk about Progress City. It's a great story. It's time once again for our Unexplained Files. On our last episode, we interviewed Glenn Gerard, who frequently spends time communicating with a family of Sasquatch outside of Houston, Texas. After that interview, we got in contact with cryptozoology investigator Daniel Jones. We asked Daniel about his thoughts about the Glenn Gerard interview. He had this to say. Have you seen Bigfoot?
There are a lot of different issues with the Bigfoot phenomenon, and I think that while it's getting more widespread and we're bringing more awareness to this field, I think it's important to keep an open mind. And while I myself haven't had a personal encounter, I've talked with several people who have, and that's something I really enjoy doing, is going out and connecting with people and exploring places that have activity throughout the state and anywhere else I can go to. But I think that with all the information I've come across, there's no doubt in my mind that if this was taken to court of law, that it could pass 9 times out of 10, given that the jury wasn't biased. With all the anecdotal evidence, witness reports, tracks and casts, all of that kind of stuff, it seems to build a very strong foundation for a hominid of some sort, whether we're dealing with another species or if it's just an offshoot of known hominids. I think that there's a lot to it, and it's an important factor in our place biologically, zoologically. So I think it's well worth the time to look into it, take it into consideration. While some people might brush it off or say it's silly or nonsense, those people probably haven't ever not only encountered one, of course, but talked to someone who has had an experience, which you could tell for those who have had a really, sincere experience. They get emotional, they have trauma whenever they have an encounter sometimes, and that comes out whenever they recount it. And I think it's something that you can't just discredit or disregard just because it doesn't fit into someone's current way of thinking. So we have to be open in a way that allows for these other things like Bigfoot and all these other mystery animals and strange creatures to fit in somewhere, because if nature's providing it for us, or whatever is providing it, their altered genetics or whatever it is, we have to fit it in scientifically somehow. And I think it's something that is a great way for us to explore parts of the unknown, even in the modern day.
Speaking of parts of the unknown, you are more or less an expert on things, particularly in Texas, that are odd. And can you describe some of those things that you've discovered over the years?
Sure. So I'm fascinated with all accounts of things like UFOs, mystery lights, strange objects. Of course, we talked about strange creatures all throughout the conference today and yesterday, but also out-of-place artifacts and things like that. Just things that don't seem to fit into place with the modern timeline or region. And that's something I think is a lot of fun to go and explore and look into.
Give us an example of an out-of-place artifact.
Well, our conference here is hosted by Joe Taylor of the Mount Blanco Fossil Museum, and he actually was gracious enough to show me a reproduction he has of an artifact called the London Hammer. And this was discovered in London, Texas. Not a lot of people realize there is a London, Texas, but there was an artifact discovered down a well, and it seems to be what appears like a Stone Age type hammer embedded in a rock of coal. So if we find something like a Stone Age type hammer embedded in a rock of coal way down at the bottom of a well somewhere in Texas, it could suggest that maybe there's more that's been going on than we realize, historically speaking. Along with something like the London Hammer, it's important to note that whenever these items are found, we don't necessarily always date the item itself, but rather the layer of earth that it's found within to suggest a rough estimate of the time frame that it could have been in use. And that's not even to just suggest its origins, but maybe just the time that it would have been active. So when you also have things like fossilized human footprints out in Glen Rose, Texas, the Dinosaur Valley and Paluxy River, it suggests a completely different model of history than what we think is the right one, or the one we hear about in school and in textbooks. And it makes one wonder what all has been happening this whole time. Are we receiving one version of the story, or are we being limited to a particular point of view? Are we filtering these out-of-place artifacts out of our models of history because they don't fit in? And it's very interesting because these OOPARTs, as they're sometimes called, there are some very interesting things in Texas, but when you're looking at a global or just a worldwide perspective, it really suggests that we're dealing with a completely different model of history.
The tool that was found at the bottom of the well, this is found as the well was being dug. Is that correct? Or in other words, the well didn't exist hundreds or thousands of years ago. This is in a strata of rock. So how could that tool have been encased in that, right?
Sure, you're right, Michael. So I think that it's important to note that sometimes with modern architecture and structural engineering, equipment can be left behind and then buried and then rediscovered a few years later, suggesting that it got lost along the way. But it can also be confusing to those who find it in an area which might predate modern civilization.
Like encased in rock.
Exactly. And if this really is something that overthrows the current model of history, we have to really take into consideration if it's just a hammer, there had to have been people and other tools and other things like that could have been around this area. So we need to kind of look for those inferences to see if there's any corroborating artifacts or evidence that can suggest a civilization or a culture that was working around that time frame. I think most scientists don't want to ruin their reputation, so they throw it aside, and it doesn't get acknowledged, and it doesn't get any kind of real scientific scrutiny in the way one would hope, simply because as science aims to progress and explore and understand nature and culture and anthropology, we'd hope that if we find something that we don't say, well, that's just impossible because this textbook said so and these scientists said so, but that we need to rethink what we're dealing with, and if it's possible that there could be something embedded in a well such as this in London, Texas, that, like you said, was being dug up to be used, and in that process, they came about finding this artifact. And to most people, it would seem to even suggesting that type of time frame is completely bizarre and not even worth looking into. But when it's not just this item, but several other items, and then we see fossilized human footprints that are
next to the fossilized dinosaur footprints.
It just suggests something that goes beyond our scope of what we think is accepted history. And it is accepted because that's just what we are taught. And I think that the more we question history and the more things that pop out, they're simply just covered back up, almost literally, if they don't fit into the current paradigm of scientific thought. So I think with some of these finds, we have to be careful not to assume, oh, this must mean that people have been around for a million years, when it might just be some surface level tool that could have been used on a construction project 50 to 100 years ago. But again, if you find something embedded in coal way down in the earth that doesn't really seem to fit in, it could suggest something completely different. And I think it's okay to take that approach and at least take it into consideration, look into it, see where it goes. I think we're throwing away missing puzzle pieces to our convoluted history.
You've been listening to the continuing investigations from the Free Range Texan Unexplained Files. For more information about Daniel Jones or the information contained in this edition, go to freerangetexan.net. The year was 1968. I was a young first-year rookie on a radio station down in the holler from where a fella across the street from my daddy's warehouse opened a barbecue joint. C.B. Stubblefield was a friend of mine. I'd come through the door and he'd say, "Well, hello, Michael." Little did we know in those days that he would become a Texas icon. First, for barbecue. The best barbecue you ever tasted. And after that, people of notoriety began beating a path to his door. We used to sit around and the likes of Jesse Guitar Taylor, Joe Ely, Tom T. Hall, and a host of others would simply walk through the door, usually on Sunday night, pick up a guitar and start strumming and singing the blues. It was a special time. Now, I've said all that to tell you this. Stubbs Barbecue became legendary. Old Stubbs moved to Austin, and he became big news. Not only for his barbecue, but for his sauce. Oh my! Stubbs barbecue sauce is the best barbecue sauce you ever had. Now, there's quite a few different variations of flavors, but the place to start is with the original. And I want to tell you, to this day, there is a bottle of Stubbs barbecue sauce in my refrigerator all the time. We do not barbecue without it. Texans have taken Stubbs barbecue a lot of places, but you can't buy it everywhere. So if you live outside the state of Texas in some other areas or outside the United States, real Texans know real barbecue, and real barbecue deserves Stubbs barbecue sauce. The good news is you can find it on our website, freerangetexan.net. You go there, and there is a goods and services area. You go in there, and you'll find it right away. Like my old friend Big Ed Wilkes used to say, it'll fling a craving on you. So go to freerangetexan.net and pick you up a bottle of Stubbs barbecue sauce. Oh, well, excuse me, I was just getting into the blues there a little bit. Free Range Texan, we're glad you joined us. If you think about it, don't forget to subscribe before you get away. That's always appreciated. I'll tell you another thing that's appreciated. If you've got something to say, we'd like to hear it. freerangetexan.net has, among other things, a blog there. I'm telling you, you can get on that and really get carried away. We read every word. Put a log on the campfire. We're about to start. Hi, this is Michael Shawn. Come on up to the campfire. Got a story for you. I like a good campfire story, and so does Linda Rigsby. She inspired this one. Jasper's mind was on the talk he was going to be giving over at the junior college on the other side of Wolf Creek Pass. He and his pickup knew every hairpin curve in the miles ahead, and he still had over an hour to get there. It was 6 p.m. Light fades quickly in the Rocky Mountains. When his attention returned to the road, his pickup had drifted over the center line. Another vehicle rounded the curve, and it too was over the center line. Jasper swerved over as far as he dared. Plunging over the edge of the highway, Jasper clung to the steering wheel. The trees would stop his fall. The sound of brush and rocks slashed at his pickup. His foot stomped on the brake pedal. The pickup lunged off a rock outcropping, and the front bumper plowed into the ground. But the truck lost no momentum. In fact, it was increasing its speed. Shattered glass showered over his body. No amount of turning the steering wheel had any effect. A big tree appeared directly ahead. There was the sound of a crush, and instantly following an explosive blow to his head. Jasper slowly opened his eyes to the darkness and shivered with cold. He lifted his head and winced in pain. He explored his shoulder. It was swollen around his collarbone. A deep gash in his scalp was crusted over with blood. How long had he been unconscious? What about the other car? He tried the door. It opened. He fell out on the ground painfully. He stared up at the shadowy hill. There's no way he can climb that, even in the daylight, with two good arms and legs. Would he die there, alone? He must have passed out again. He woke up to a full moon. By now he had missed giving his talk, and surely they must be looking for him. June, his wife, was expecting him home at 10:30. He realized if he was to get out alive, it was going to be on his own. He pulled with his right arm and pushed with his good leg, inching his way up the hill. Push, pull, push, pull. He lost consciousness again. This time he woke up in the inky blackness of pre-dawn. How far was it to the highway? His head felt like it was splitting. Pain shot through his shoulder and foot. He drug himself on the ground until the highway was just a few feet away. He heard footsteps. Then June climbed out of the brush. "Jasper, the police have been looking for you all night. Where's your pickup?" Jasper pointed down the hill. June said, "I don't see it." "Holy smoke," she said when she finally spotted the wreck. "How do you feel?" Jasper said, "Well, I made it up the hill." Then Jasper looked at June and said, "I wasn't alone. I talked to you and thinking about you all the way up the hill." And June said, "And I found you." He said, "Everything's all right, June. The good Lord looked after us. I knew you would find me." Someday he'd tell her just how many times he had given up, but right now he just wanted a drink of water and some sleep. I'm Michael Shawn, and I love a happy ending. That's the way it is at the Campfire. Adios, my friends. Well, we got it all in again. Hey, y'all, don't forget to get your Stubbs barbecue sauce at freerangetexan.net. We'll see you next time.
Y'all been listening to the Free Range Texan podcast. If you'd like more information about our show or where to find the products we talked about on Free Range Texan, visit our website at freerangetexan.net. That's freerangetexan.net. Free Range Texan is produced out yonder at A-Team PR Studios. Speaking for Michael Shawn and the rest of our crew, this is Sweetie Pie, and we'll see you next time on the Free Range Texan podcast.